You are thinking about learning Chinese. After doing a bit of research, you quickly realize that the amount of information available for studying the language is overwhelming. You could easily spend years just going through it all. At that point, you may start asking yourself, should I study on my own? Or would it be better to have a tutor or attend a language center? This is you, and I'd like to share some of my experiences on this topic. Hopefully, they will be helpful to you. Let's get started. When I first started thinking about learning Chinese, at that time, honestly, I had absolutely no idea what I should do next. And the most obvious option seemed to be signing up for a Chinese course at a language center. So I started looking for Chinese language centers. I was completely overwhelmed by how many of them there were and by everything they claimed they could offer. That was probably the moment I officially entered what people call the paradox of choice. I visited a few of these centers and watched some of the promotional videos they had posted online, and to be honest, I was quite shocked. Many of them were selling unauthorized copies of textbooks, and they promised that students would pass the XSK exams or even become fluent in Chinese after just 3 months of study. That was a huge red flag for me, and well, that's basically where my relationship with those centers ended. I never went back. Some other language centers were very eager to convince me to sign up and, of course, pay the tuition fee, mainly by saying things like, you can take the XSK exams as soon as possible. But I honestly didn't get it. Do I really need an HSK certificate? Still, I tried. I really tried to be patient and give them the benefit of the doubt. So I attended one of their trial classes, which lasted for about 30 minutes. I was not a Chinese expert, but I had listened to a lot of Chinese through movies, TV dramas, and similar content. And during that class, I honestly couldn't recognize the pronunciation at all. I couldn't hear anything familiar, no similar sounds, no melody, no rhythm. That made me doubt myself so much that I decided to step back and give myself more time before making a decision. A few months later, I finally found a course that seemed much more reasonable. They clearly explained their learning roadmap, recommended licensed textbooks, and stated realistically that after 6 months, students would have a basic foundation for further study. That sounded fair to me, so I signed up, paid the tuition fee, and I was genuinely excited to finally start learning Chinese. And then, after just the first class, they refunded my money. Apparently, there weren't enough students, so they couldn't continue the course. How interesting. So that's when I started my self-study journey, and it turned out to suit me really well. One surprise followed another along the way, and at some point, I honestly started wondering, why didn't I just start with self-study in the first place? I want to share this story with you because maybe, just maybe, it can help us reflect on our decisions and take away some lessons that could be beneficial to our language learning journey. For a long time, I followed the norm without much critical thinking or careful consideration. Whenever I wanted to learn something, I would find a class, find a tutor, follow their instructions, and sit exams, and so on. I did this to the point that I did not even ask myself, do I have any other alternatives? Everything changed when I realized that learning Chinese through self-study actually suited me very well. That realization truly hit home. I began to think about how I had allowed the default mode to lead my life, even though in many cases it was only a mediocre option. Looking back, I could have chosen much more suitable alternatives. Since then, I have occasionally asked myself this question: am I choosing this part because it genuinely works best for me, or simply because it is the norm that barely keeps me going while I suffer the consequences. I know that sounds extreme. However, sometimes by asking ourselves these tough questions, something clicks and a better alternative comes to mind. After following a conventional path and the norm for a long time, I gradually forgot that everyone has different circumstances, personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. I applied the default mode with the hidden assumption that we are all the same and therefore should all follow the same route. In reality, that is not true in many cases. However, at that time, I truly fell into that trap. After asking myself the first question about my learning choices, I started to understand myself better. I realized that I was much more comfortable doing deep learning on my own. I was easily distracted by other people's conversations, and even if someone asked me something that only took 1 minute to answer, it could take me another 20 to 30 minutes to return to a deep learning mode. Deep down, this situation made me feel anxious. At home, however, I had my own space with almost everything I needed to study Chinese. In that environment, I could maintain my focus much more effectively. This allowed me to spend higher quality time studying Chinese. That said, your situation may be different from mine, so it's important to take the time to find an option that suits you best. Another important point is understanding our own strengths and weaknesses. I believe that someone who is open-minded and disciplined, has good critical thinking skills, knows how to enjoy the learning process, and is able to set aside high quality time for studying would be well suited to a self-study approach. I am still working on this myself, but I have already gained much more enjoyment from my learning journey. By the way, I don't think that self-study and attending classes necessarily conflict with each other. In fact, we can choose a hybrid approach that combines both self-study and classes if that turns out to be the better option for us. I hope that my experience in finding a learning method that suits me, as well as learning how to spot red flags in language centers and tutors, will be helpful to you in discovering a better path for yourself. In future episodes, I would also like to share a few things I would have done differently if, as a Chinese self-learner, I had the chance to go back in time. Thank you for sharing your time with me and happy language learning.